Roguelikes live or die on their combat, and this genre's never been more stacked. So I sat down, replayed way too many runs, and curated this list of 20 best action roguelites you can play right now. Let's start with the Slormancer, because this thing has more numbers on screen than a tax audit. You're building a character across skills, traits, ancestral legacies, and gear affixes that all stack into these absurd damage combos. Look, if you're the type who opens a build calculator before you've even hit level 5, this is basically a love letter to you. The skill tree isn't a tree, it's more like a sprawling city with no zoning laws, and that's a compliment. Every session, you're chasing some new synergy. Fire totems that explode into ice, minions that buff each other into oblivion, and the game simply lets you cook. It's dense, it's a little overwhelming at first, and it takes maybe 10 hours before things click. But once they do, you're not playing a roguelite anymore. You're running a spreadsheet with a sword attached. I know theory crafting heavy games scare people off, but stick with it. The payoff here is one of the deepest build systems the genre has ever produced. Give it a real shot before you bounce off. Sequels to beloved games are basically cursed. Every fanbase says they want more of the same, then complains the second it feels too familiar. Hades 2 somehow threads that needle. You're Melanoe now, hunting Kronos instead of escaping the underworld, and the action's been reworked with a stance system that lets you swap between melee and ranged mid-fight. It sounds like a small change? Well, it's not small at all. It changes how you approach basically every encounter. The Witch Cauldron adds this full crafting layer too, which I wasn't expecting to care about, but here we are. What really gets me is the writing. Supergiant simply doesn't miss with dialogue, and every death feels like it's building towards something, instead of merely resetting the clock. Is it as tight as the original yet? Not fully, but the bones here are stronger than most finished games manage, and that's saying something. Come to think of it, the fact they're iterating on this in public, patching weapons and rebalancing bosses based on player feedback, might end up being the smartest move Supergiant's ever made.
I would like to see you try.
Death to Kronos.
Picture this. You grapple onto a ledge, slide kick through 3 enemies, and land a shotgun blast before you've even touched the ground. That entire chain takes maybe 2 seconds. That's Roboquest in a nutshell. It's Doom's momentum crossed with a roguelite's build chaos, and it moves fast, really fast. You're picking classes, stacking perks, swapping weapons mid-run, and the entire time you're bunny hopping and grappling like the floor is lava. The FPS roguelite hybrid has been tried a dozen times, and most of them feel clunky. The shooting's an afterthought bolted onto the roguelite systems. Not here. The gunplay is the foundation. Everything else builds on top of it. Boss fights lean a little arena shooter, which won't click for everyone, but the movement tech alone carries entire attempts. There's a real skill ceiling too. The difference between a decent player and a great one is night and day once you see someone chain grapples across a full room without touching the ground. It rewards practice in a way a lot of shooters simply don't bother to anymore, and that alone makes it worth your time. Co-op brawlers have a combo problem. Most of them let you button mash your way through encounters, and the combo system is really a damage multiplier dressed up to look deep. Absolum actually asks something of you. You've got 4 characters, each with wildly different movesets, and the action leans hard into positioning. Where you stand relative to an enemy matters as much as what button you press. Juggles feel earned instead of accidental. Swapping characters mid-combo to extend a string is where the real depth lives, and once you start chaining that stuff together, it clicks in a way most brawlers never manage. I'll admit the visual noise gets rough in 4-player chaos. You lose track of your character for a second here and there. Minor gripe though. The bigger deal is how much the game respects your time investment. Every hour you put into learning matchups actually pays off in later fights. It's built by ex-Dead Cells folks, and you can feel that pedigree in how tight the hit feedback is. Every parry snaps right when you'd expect. Every hit lands with real weight.
Finally reach Azra's tower. The journey will be long.
Absolum's got you thinking in terms of group tactics and careful positioning. Wizard of Legend throws that entire mindset out the window. This one's solo, and it's fast. Like, uncomfortably fast the first few runs. You're chaining spells together on the fly, mixing elements to create these improvised combo strings, and the whole thing rewards pure reflex over planning. There's no real pause button in your brain here. You're merely reacting. The relic system lets you build wildly weird loadouts, turning your dash into a damage source, or making every spell cast leave a hazard behind. I used to think the arcadey difficulty spikes were unfair, until I realized most deaths came from me getting greedy with combos, instead of respecting my resource bar. That reframe changed everything for me. It's short compared to most entries on this list, a few hours to see the credits, but the replayability through relic combos stretches that out considerably. Underrated pick still. If you've got a friend who claims they're good at action games, hand them this and watch the ego check itself real quick.
Dead Cells. If you've spent any time in this genre, you already know why it's here. This is the benchmark. The game everyone else on this list gets measured against, whether the devs admit it or not. The movement is the whole pitch. Rolling, parrying, whip-cracking through rooms with this fluid, almost dance-like precision. It's fluid, it's ridiculously arcadey, and every weapon feels distinct enough that switching loadouts actually changes how an attempt plays out. Well, that's not entirely fair. Some weapon tiers are simply objectively stronger, let's be real. But even the weaker picks are fun to mess around with, which says a lot. Years of updates have turned this into this sprawling, biome-hopping monster of a game, with branching paths and secret areas that reward exploration over simply rushing the exit. Look, there's a reason it sold this many copies. It earns the reputation. If you only ever play one roguelite in your life, statistically, it's probably going to be this one. It's the entry point most people use to get into this genre, and it still holds up.
ARPGs have a color problem. Dungeon after dungeon, they all start blurring into the same brown and gray sludge after a while. You forget which game you're even playing. Hellclock doesn't have that issue. This thing looks like a metal album cover come to life, all cathedral spires and cursed clockwork, and it commits to that aesthetic hard. Underneath the visuals, though, it's a properly mechanical build crafter. Skill trees, gear affixes, the full ARPG toolkit, but wrapped in a pace that's noticeably snappier than its peers. The combat has weight without feeling sluggish, which is a tightrope a lot of games in this space fail to walk. There's a cursed time mechanic, too, tied into the full clock theming, that adds pressure to how you approach fights instead of letting you turtle forever. It's still finding its footing in some areas. Balance patches are coming fast, which tells you the devs are paying attention. For style alone, though, this one's worth your time immediately. Rare to see an ARPG this early in development already commit so hard to a specific identity instead of chasing what already sells.
Okay, palate cleanser time. If Hellclock had you staring into some cursed gothic abyss for the last few minutes, Crab Champions is here to remind you games can simply be dumb fun. You're an armored crab, with guns, fighting other armored crustaceans across neon-drenched arenas. That's the full premise, and it commits to it beautifully. The shooting's got a real punch to it, chunky, satisfying, the kind of feedback that makes even basic enemies fun to pop. Weapon variety is where it really shines, though, with pickups ranging from straightforward shotguns to stuff that's borderline unhinged. There's a roguelite structure underneath the silliness too, upgrades and mutations stacking session over session, so it's not simply style over substance. I'll admit the humor's an acquired taste. Some of the crab puns land, some really don't. But the core shooting feels good enough on its own to carry you through even the groan-worthy jokes. Sometimes you simply need a game that doesn't take itself seriously, and this fills the gap nicely. Great one for friends when nobody wants to think too hard about builds.
There's a moment where you're mid-combo, juggling an enemy in the air, and you swap elemental stances on the fly. Fire dash cancels into a lightning uppercut, and the full thing chains without a hitch. That's Astral Ascent doing what it does best. It's a Metroidvania roguelite hybrid, and the stance switching is the real hook. 3 different elemental styles, each with its own combo strings, and mixing them mid-fight is where the depth lives. The pixel art is gorgeous too, some of the best sprite work in the genre right now. No notes there, full stop. Bosses demand you actually learn their patterns instead of simply tanking hits with a big health bar. That's refreshing. Progression unlocks new movement options as you go, so later playthroughs feel meaningfully different from your first few hours. It's got some pacing hiccups in the mid-game where exploration slows down, but the gameplay alone makes up for it. Sleeper hit, seriously underrated by most best of lists. If you liked Hades but wanted something with a bit more platforming and precision jumping baked into the traversal, this scratches that exact itch.
Are you gonna start crying?
Most 3D roguelites completely botch the scaling curve. Either enemies outpace your build by the mid-game and every dive turns into a slog, or you snowball so hard the back half feels pointless. Risk of Rain 2 nails this better than almost anything else in 3D. The item stacking is the complete game. You're grabbing dozens of passives per run, and watching your character transform from a fragile little guy into an unkillable chaos engine is one of the best power fantasies out there. Every item has a visual tell too, so late game you're basically wearing your entire build. There's a difficulty option tied to time, not simply enemy count, which forces you to keep moving instead of farming safely forever. That choice alone fixes problems other games in this space struggle with. Co-op is where it really sings. 4 players stacking loot simultaneously creates this beautiful screen-filling madness. It's not perfect, some items are clearly stronger picks than others, but as a scaling power fantasy, nothing else really touches it. Years after release, it's still getting free content drops, which is more than most games can claim.
Gunfire Reborn. This one's the elemental FPS looter that somehow flies under the radar despite being consistently excellent for years now. You're picking a hero, each with their own elemental affinity, and stacking gear that pushes fire, ice, wind, or lightning builds into increasingly absurd territory. The gunplay itself feels properly tight. Recoil patterns you can actually learn, weapon variety that goes way beyond bigger number gun. What sells it for me is how the elemental interactions stack. Fire plus wind creates burn spread, ice plus lightning creates this frozen shock combo that chains across full rooms. It's borderline theory crafting light without the overwhelming spreadsheet feeling some looters lean into. Co-op scaling is generous too. 4 players doesn't mean 4 times the bullet sponge frustration, enemies actually scale sensibly. I know looter shooters get a bad rap for feeling grindy, and look, this one does ask for time investment, but the moment-to-moment shooting is fun enough that the grind never really feels like a chore. Weapon rarity tiers keep drops feeling meaningful too, so even a routine room clear can hand you something worth rebuilding your full loadout around.
And enter Death's realm once again.
Coming off Gunfire Reborn's gunplay-first approach, Death Must Die swings the pendulum hard toward melee horde chaos. This is a top-down ARPG where the screen fills with enemies fast, and your job is basically to become a walking apocalypse. Skill combos chain into these gorgeous particle effect explosions, and by mid-run, you literally can't see your own character under the visual noise. That's not a complaint, by the way. That's the appeal. The build variety leans into classic ARPG affix stacking, but the pacing is way more aggressive than something like Path of Exile. You're not slowly building toward a power spike over dozens of hours, you're hitting that dopamine hit within a single 20-minute attempt. Bosses are legitimately well designed too, telegraphed patterns that punish greed without feeling cheap. It's early access still, so there's some jank around difficulty balancing in the late game. But the core power fantasy, becoming an unstoppable death machine, is realized here better than in most full-priced ARPGs on the market right now. Give it a couple patches, and this could easily be a genre standout, instead of simply a solid early access pick. There's this idea that roguelites need to be forgiving to be good. Generous checkpoints, easy comebacks, that kind of thing. Returnal exists specifically to prove that idea wrong. This is a brutal, unforgiving bullet hell shooter dressed up as a AAA third-person action game, and it does not care about your feelings. Die, and you're back at square one. No exceptions, no shortcuts. What makes it work is how good the actual shooting feels. Weapon mods stack in interesting ways, the movement's got this weighty precision to it, and boss fights are these gorgeous, screen-filling spectacles of bullet patterns you need to actually read. I died more times than I'd like to admit to the second boss. A lot more. But every death taught me something specific, which is the full point of a well-designed roguelite in the first place. The story's properly unsettling, too, told through environmental clues and audio logs that build this creeping horror atmosphere. Not for everyone, difficulty-wise, but if you want punishment with purpose, where every death teaches you to room instead of wasting your time, this delivers on that promise.
Cycle breaks me.
Picture this. Your mag's empty, enemies are closing in from two directions, and you're manually racking the slide back because auto-reload here simply doesn't exist in the way you'd expect. Every second that reload takes is a second you're not shooting, and the tension of that is the entire game in a nutshell. Synthetik Legion Rising is a top-down shooter that treats gun mechanics with this weirdly obsessive level of detail. Actual reload animations, ammo types that matter, weapon mods that fundamentally change how a gun handles. It's dense. Overwhelming at first. There's a real learning curve before things click. Well, click might undersell it. More like the moment you finally understand why everyone kept telling you to respect your ammo count. Enemy variety keeps runs from feeling repetitive too. Different factions demand different approaches entirely. It's punishing in that classic roguelite way. Deaths feel earned rather than cheap. If you've ever wanted a shooter that actually respects the mechanical weight of a reload, treats it as a real decision instead of a loading bar formality, this is basically the purest version of that idea currently on the market. After Synthetik's punishing, reload-obsessed solo grind, Windblown feels like exhaling. This one's built for co-op. 3 players zipping around these open arena hub levels on skates, dashing and slashing through enemy waves with this loose, breezy momentum that never really lets up. It's from the Dead Cells team, so the core mechanics are predictably tight, but the traversal here is the real star. You're constantly moving, grinding rails and dashing between platforms, and combat weaves into that movement instead of interrupting it. The weapon variety is solid. Dual wielding lets you mix and match wildly different playstyles on the fly. I'll admit the roguelite structure feels a touch lighter than Dead Cells proper. Runs are shorter, stakes feel lower, but that's kind of the point here. It's built for quick, replayable co-op sessions rather than long solo grinds. Bosses are chaotic in a fun way, lots of arena hazards to dodge alongside the actual attacks. If you want something breezy to play with friends after a rough solo session elsewhere, this is exactly that palate cleanser. Light on stakes, heavy on momentum. Ember Knights, 4-player co-op roguelite, and it wears that built-for-friends identity proudly on its sleeve. You're picking heroes with distinct kits, mixing weapons and relics, and the full package is tuned so a group of mixed-skill players can actually have fun together without someone constantly carrying. The combat's fast, colorful, arcadey in the best sense, dashes, parries, elemental status effects stacking up into some wonderfully chaotic, screen-filling moments during boss fights. Accessibility is clearly a priority too. Difficulty options that let newer players ease in without the full squad suffering for it. I know some hardcore roguelite fans turn their nose up at anything that isn't punishingly difficult by default, but there's real value in a game that lets 4 friends with wildly different skill levels actually finish a playthrough together. The art style's got this warm, storybook charm that separates it visually from most of the genre's darker aesthetics. It's not reinventing anything mechanically, sure, but as a hangout game for co-op night, it's easily one of the better picks available right now. And that's a harder thing to nail than people give it credit for. Base-building sims and roguelike mechanics almost never work together well. Usually one system gets prioritized and the other feels bolted on, an afterthought nobody put real effort into. Cult of the Lamb is one of the rare exceptions that manages both halves properly. You're literally running a cult, recruiting followers, managing their happiness, building shrines, all this colony sim management stuff, and then heading out into these punchy, satisfying roguelite dungeons to fight for resources and progression. Both loops feed into each other in ways that actually matter. Dungeon dives fund your cult's growth, and a thriving cult buffs your battle capabilities. The tone is doing a lot of work here too. This adorable art style paired with properly dark cult manipulation themes creates a weird tonal whiplash that somehow simply works. Combat's simpler than most dedicated roguelites on this list, sure, that's a fair critique. But as a hybrid experiment, it's one of the few that earns the comparison to both genres it's borrowing from, and it keeps you coming back for one more shrine upgrade or one more dungeon crawl in equal measure. After Cult of the Lamb's whimsical, slightly unhinged cult management, Witchfire drags you into something considerably grimmer. This is a dark fantasy gunslinger roguelite with extraction shooters sprinkled on, and it wears its punishing difficulty like a badge of honor. It is also noteworthy that the game was developed by a studio of 12 developers, which is absolutely bonkers given how it looks and plays. You're a witch hunter, cycling through a corrupted island, and the gunplay here has this deliberate, weighty feel. Every shot matters, ammo's scarce, and enemies hit hard enough that positioning becomes a survival skill rather than an optional nicety. The persistent progression between playthroughs softens the sting of dying. You're not losing everything every single time, which keeps the brutal difficulty from tipping into pure frustration. Visually, it's stunning. Moody, gothic environments that reward exploring off the beaten path. I'll admit the pacing's slower than most entries here. This isn't a game you blast through in an afternoon. It rewards patience, careful play, actually reading the room before you commit to a fight. If Dark Souls and a roguelite had a baby, raised on cathedral horror and a diet of shotgun shells, this is roughly what you get, and it's worth the patience it demands from you.
There's this specific panic that sets in when the screen fills with a dozen bullet patterns at once, and you're weaving through gaps that seem to shrink by the frame. Your dodge roll's on cooldown, you're pinned against a wall, and somehow you find the one clean path through. That feeling is the complete appeal of Enter the Gungeon. It's a bullet hell dungeon crawler where the guns themselves are the joke and the challenge simultaneously. Ridiculous weapons, ridiculous enemy names, and bullet patterns that demand real precision to survive. The dodge roll is the core mechanic here. It's not merely movement, it's your primary defensive tool, and mastering its timing is basically the whole skill curve of the game. Weapon variety is absurd. Hundreds of guns, ranging from practical to deliberately useless merely for the bit. I still think some of the later floors lean a little too hard into bullet density for its own sake, but the core loop of reading patterns and threading needles never stops being satisfying, run after run, until it finally clicks and you clear a room without taking a single hit. We've spent this complete list dodging bullets, reading patterns, threading tight gaps between danger and safety. Vampire Survivors looks at that entire philosophy and says, why bother dodging when you can simply become the danger yourself? This is the opposite approach, and it's brilliant precisely because of that contrast. You move, you level up, and your weapons auto-fire in every direction until the screen is an absolute wall of projectiles, wiping out hordes without you touching an attack button. It sounds like it shouldn't work, watching numbers scale until the complete screen turns into visual soup, but there's real strategy underneath. Positioning still matters, evolution combos between weapons and passives create these wildly different builds, and knowing when to kite versus when to stand and clear is a skill in itself. It's cheap, it's endlessly replayable, and it single-handedly proved an entire new subgenre could exist. Fitting closer for this list. After 19 games about precision, dodging, and careful reads, this one's about pure, glorious, screen-filling chaos, and there's real satisfaction in ending the whole list on that exact note. That's all the time I have for this video, so which game would you be playing next? Comment below, and as usual, like the video if you like it, and sub for more videos like this. I'll catch you on the next one.